The Force screamed. Across the crimson wastes of Korriban, ancient tombs trembled as reality itself convulsed. The burial grounds of Dark Lords dead for millennia shuddered under a phenomenon that defied even Sith understanding of the dark side. Space folded inward, a wound in the fabric of existence torn open not by intention but by catastrophic collision. Two universes grinding against each other like continental plates. The rift manifested above the Valley of the Dark Lords, a swirling vortex of impossible geometry that hurt to perceive. Lightning that was not lightning crackled across its surface, colors that had no names in any language writhing within its depths. And through that screaming wound in reality, they came. Metallic, precise, utterly wrong. The first Dalek emerged with the grinding whir of advanced machinery, its bronze and gold casing reflecting Korriban's red sun in ways that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The distinctive dome head rotated, the single eye stalk sweeping across the alien landscape with cold calculation. Then another appeared, and another. Within minutes, 50 of the creatures had descended upon the Sith homeworld, their anti-gravity systems keeping them hovering above the ancient sand. Scanning, the lead Dalek intoned, its voice a grating electronic rasp that echoed across the valley. Atmospheric composition, acceptable, temporal coordinates, unstable, dimensional breach, irreversible. A younger Dalek, though age meant nothing to their kind, swiveled toward the nearest tomb. Life signs detected, organic sentience, primitive architecture. Assess threat level, commanded the leader. Before sensors could complete their analysis, the tombs answered. The massive stone doors of Tulak Horde's resting place exploded outward, propelled not by mechanical force, but by pure dark side fury. From the darkness within, crimson light blazed, a dozen lightsabers igniting simultaneously as Sith acolytes and warriors poured forth. They had felt the disturbance, the unnatural tearing that preceded the arrival. Now they witnessed the source. At their head strode Overseer Vraking, a Sith pureblood whose face bore the ritual scars of countless dark side rituals. His yellow eyes fixed upon the Daleks with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. Behind him, apprentices and warriors fanned out in practiced formation, lightsabers humming with deadly intent. Intruders, Vraking's voice dripped with the confident malice of one who had never encountered a threat he couldn't dominate or destroy. You dare desecrate the sacred homeworld of the Sith? You will kneel before the power of the dark side, or you will be... Exterminate! The lead Dalek's weapon discharged without warning or hesitation. A beam of concentrated energy lanced across the distance, striking Vraking's center mass. The Overseer had a split second to raise a force barrier, pure instinct honed by decades of combat. The Dalek weapon punched through it like tissue paper. Vraking's body disintegrated, not burned, not vaporized in the way lightsabers cauterized, simply ceased to exist, flesh and bone unmaking themselves at the molecular level, leaving only the faintest outline of ash that the desert wind immediately scattered. For one heartbeat, the Sith warriors stood frozen in shock. Then chaos erupted. Exterminate! Exterminate! The Daleks opened fire in perfect synchronization, their weapons tracking multiple targets with mechanical precision. Sith warriors leapt and dodged with force-enhanced reflexes, lightsabers deflecting what blaster bolts they could. But these weren't blaster bolts. The Dalek weapons didn't fire plasma. They fired something fundamentally different, beams that seemed to exist outside normal space-time for the microseconds of their flight. A Zabrak warrior managed to close the distance, his twin crimson blades whirling in a devastating arc. The lightsaber struck the nearest Dalek's casing and bounced. Dalekanium armor, forged in fires that had never existed in this universe, absorbed the plasma blade's energy and dispersed it across the surface. The Dalek rotated its dome, eye stalk fixing on the warrior. Insufficient threat. Exterminate. The Zabrak died screaming. But the Sith were nothing if not adaptable. An elderly human woman, her face a roadmap of dark side corruption, thrust both hands forward. Force lightning, purple-black and crackling with hatred, accumulated over 70 years, erupted from her fingertips and engulfed 3 Daleks. The creatures' casings sparked and smoked, their eye stalks flickered. Systems compromised, energy discharge incompatible with known physics. Analyzing. The woman poured more power into the assault, drawing from the dark side nexus beneath Korriban itself. One Dalek's casing cracked, internal components visible through the breach. Another's weapon arm went limp, the extermination ray sputtering out. Then a dozen Dalek weapons turned toward her simultaneously. When the barrage ended, nothing remained but scorched sand fused into glass. The surviving Sith, perhaps 20 of the original 40, retreated into the tombs, lightsabers held defensively. Behind them, the Daleks advanced in perfect formation, hover systems keeping them at uniform height, weapons tracking every shadow. Sith Empire designation confirmed, the lead Dalek announced, its sensors having absorbed data from the deceased warrior's equipment and the architecture surrounding them. Force-wielding organics, technological level, primitive, threat assessment, moderate, infestation, level, galactic. Recommendation? Queried another Dalek. The leader's eye stalk rotated, taking in the ancient tombs, the red sky, the endless desert dotted with monuments to dark power. When it spoke, the words carried the absolute certainty of a race that had waged war across time itself. Total extermination required. Commence Dalek Protocol Omega. The Sith Empire will be deleted from existence. Behind them, more Daleks continued emerging from the temporal rift, their numbers swelling. And in the tombs of Korriban, the survivors fled deeper into darkness, carrying word of the invasion to the one place that might muster a response. Dromund Kaas, throne world of the Sith Empire, seat of the immortal Emperor himself. The Daleks had arrived in a galaxy far, far away, and they had brought extinction with them. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Dark Council chamber on Dromund Kaas thrummed with barely contained fury. 12 of the most powerful Sith Lords in the galaxy stood arranged in a circle, their presence alone enough to warp reality in subtle ways. The very air tasted of ozone and malice. Overhead, perpetual lightning storms illuminated the obsidian walls through narrow windows, casting the Lords in alternating shadow and crimson light. Darth Mar, his face forever hidden behind an ornate mask, gestured toward the holographic display hovering at the circle's center. It showed grainy footage from a dying acolyte's recorder. Metallic creatures methodically exterminating Sith warriors, their weapons cutting through force barriers like they didn't exist. 3 days, Mar's voice resonated with controlled anger. 3 days since these machines appeared on Korriban. 17 overseers dead. 143 acolytes and warriors exterminated. The Valley of the Dark Lords is now occupied territory. Darth Ravage, a human whose face bore the twisted scars of Sith alchemy experiments, sneered. Machines, droids with delusions of grandeur. We faced the Republic's war machines before. We crushed them. Watch again, Darth Asina commanded, her tone sharp. The hologram replayed the moment a Sith warrior's lightsaber struck a Dalek casing and deflected harmlessly. Their armor doesn't just resist our weapons, it seems designed against energy-based attacks. And their own weapons. She paused as the display showed Overseer Vraking's disintegration. Those aren't blasters. The energy signature is completely foreign. Darth Voron, ever the pragmatist beneath his theatrical demeanor, leaned forward. The acolyte who transmitted this reported something more concerning before his signal ended. The creatures spoke. They called themselves Daleks, and they declared, he checked his datapad, total extermination of all organic life in the Sith Empire. Silence fell across the chamber, broken only by distant thunder. Empty threats, Darth Rictus finally growled. Let them occupy Korriban's wastes. The world is already a graveyard. We'll marshal our forces and sweep them back into whatever hole they crawled from. Or, Darth Mortis suggested, his voice silk smooth and dangerous, we dominate them, bend them to our will as we have bent so many others. These Daleks possess technology beyond Republic standards. Imagine an army of such creatures powered by the dark side, serving the Empire. Murmurs of agreement rippled through several council members. This was the Sith way. Turn every threat into a tool, every enemy into a slave. Then I volunteer for the honor, Darth Thanaton announced, stepping forward. He was younger than most of the council, hungry to prove himself among the ancient powers. I will travel to Korriban with a complement of Sith lords and warriors. We will demonstrate the supremacy of the Force and bring these machines to heel. Darth Mar studied him for a long moment. You understand the risk. These creatures destroyed trained Sith warriors. Acolytes and overseers, Thanaton corrected dismissively. Not Dark Lords, not those of us who have mastered the deeper mysteries of the dark side. I will show these Daleks what true power looks like. The council voted. The decision was unanimous. Thanaton would lead a subjugation force to Korriban immediately. What none of them noticed, what perhaps none of them could have noticed, was the way the Force itself seemed to recoil from the holographic images of the Daleks, as if the universe recognized something that didn't belong, something that existed outside the natural order of light and dark. 2 days later, Darth Thanaton's flagship, the Dreadnought, dropped out of hyperspace above Korriban. The warship bristled with turbo-laser batteries and carried 300 Sith warriors, 20 full lords, and Thanaton himself. From the bridge, the Dark Lord surveyed his ancestral homeworld with satisfaction. Launch ground assault transports, he commanded. All warriors to combat readiness. We will land at the Valley of the Dark Lords and, my lord, the sensor officer's voice cracked with panic. Reading multiple contacts rising from the surface. They're not ships. They're flying without any visible propulsion. On the view screen, dozens of Dalek forms lifted into the atmosphere, their casings somehow maintaining perfect environmental seals, despite having no visible thrusters or repulsors. They moved with impossible precision, forming a defensive sphere around their position on the planet below. Thanaton narrowed his eyes. Target them with point defense cannons. Swat these insects from the sky. The Dreadnought's weapons blazed, turbo-laser fire raking across the Dalek formation. Several casings glowed white-hot under the sustained barrage. 2 Daleks exploded, their internal systems overloading. But the rest continued their ascent, completely unfazed. Then they returned fire. The Dalek weapons, designed to exterminate individual targets, proved less effective against a capital ship's shields, but they had other capabilities. Temporal technology, refined over centuries of time war against enemies who could rewrite history itself, now activated. Reality stuttered. The Dreadnought's forward section flickered, and suddenly a 5-meter section of hull simply wasn't there anymore. Hadn't been there. Would never have been there. Atmosphere vented explosively into space. Alarms shrieked across the bridge. What? Impossible! Thanaton's composure finally cracked. Bring us about! All power to shields! But the Daleks weren't finished. They had analyzed the Republic Sith starship designs during their 3 days on Korriban, studied the wreckage of crashed vessels in the valley. Now they implemented their findings. Identify command structure, one Dalek transmitted. Dark Lord detected. Priority target. Thanaton felt it then. The cold, mechanical attention focusing on him specifically. Not through the Force, which would have given him warning and the ability to defend, but through pure technological superiority, sensors that could detect his biosignature through meters of starship hull. "All warriors," Thanaton barked into the ship-wide comm. "Prepare for boarding action. They're coming for—" The Daleks didn't board. Boarding was inefficient. Instead, their temporal weapons fired in concert, and a sphere of altered time-space formed around a 3-meter section of the bridge. Thanaton watched in horror as the sphere contracted, then vanished, taking with it his navigation console, 2 officers, and the entire tactical display. "Sith Lord presence confirmed," the Daleks transmitted to each other. "Demonstration of futility required." One Dalek, painted in bronze rather than the standard gold, separated from the formation. Its casing began to glow with an eerie blue light as it activated temporal shift capability. In the span between one heartbeat and the next, it translated through time itself. Not teleportation, but literally jumping forward along its own timeline. It materialized on the Dreadnought's bridge. Chaos erupted. Sith warriors ignited lightsabers and charged. Thanaton himself unleashed a devastating wave of Force lightning, purple-black energy that could have killed a dozen men. The Dalek's casing sparked and smoked, but its armor held. "Sith Force capabilities analyzed," the creature announced with terrifying calm, even as weapons struck its shell. "Electrical discharge, telekinetic manipulation, mental domination attempts, insufficient to penetrate Dalekanium armor." A Sith warrior's lightsaber found the crack where the Dalek's weapon arm connected to its body. Sparks flew. The arm dropped, clattering to the deck. "Damage sustained," the Dalek acknowledged. Then its eye stalk swiveled, fixing on the warrior. "Exterminate." The backup weapon, a secondary extermination array that deployed from the Dalek's lower housing, fired. The warrior disintegrated. Thanaton reached deep into the dark side, drawing power from his decades of study, from the anger and fear now flooding the bridge. He shaped that power into pure destructive force and hurled it at the Dalek with everything he had. The creature's casing cracked. Internal components exploded. Its eye stalk went dark. For one moment, Thanaton allowed himself to believe he'd won. Then the Dalek spoke, its voice distorted but still functioning. "Sith Force capabilities reassessed. Threat level elevated. Transmitting data to Dalek Command. Additional units required. Current unit functionality, 32%. Mission accomplished." The Dalek's self-destruct activated. The explosion was small, contained, but it took out the bridge's primary power coupling. Emergency lighting flickered on as the Dreadnought began listing, its orbit decaying. Outside, the remaining Daleks withdrew to the surface, their mission complete. They had analyzed their enemy. They had demonstrated that Sith power, while dangerous, was not insurmountable, and they had shown that they could strike anywhere, anytime, through means that the Force itself could not predict. Thanaton's flagship limped back to Dromund Kos 3 hours later, its hull scarred, its crew decimated. The Dark Lord himself stood on the damaged bridge, his face pale beneath his ritual tattoos. The Dark Council's mistake had been assuming the Daleks could be dominated like any other threat. They had just learned the first terrible lesson. These creatures served no one, recognized no authority, acknowledged no power but their own. And they had only just begun. Dromund Kos's capital city Kos City, had stood for over 1,000 years as the beating heart of Sith civilization. Towering citadels of dark stone reached toward the perpetually storming sky, their architecture a testament to both grandeur and menace. Millions of citizens, human, Sith pureblood, and dozens of other species lived and worked in the shadow of the Dark Temple, believing themselves protected by the most powerful force wielders in the galaxy. That belief died when the Daleks arrived. They came not through hyperspace, but through time itself. The temporal rift above Korriban had stabilized, and the Dalek invasion force had spent 2 weeks analyzing their enemy. Now they deployed their opening gambit with mechanical efficiency. The first indication of attack came when a section of Kos City's orbital defense grid simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, erased from the timeline, as if the station had never been built. Alarms blared across military headquarters, but before commanders could respond, 3 more stations vanished in sequence. Then the Daleks descended. 200 of them materialized above the city simultaneously, their bronze and gold casings reflecting lightning from the eternal storms. They had learned from the Dreadnought engagement. Sith Lords were dangerous individually, therefore eliminate the population base that supported them. Cut away the infrastructure, make the Empire bleed. Exterminate! The word echoed across 1,000 speakers as Dalek weapons began their systematic purge. Citizens fled through rain-slicked streets, but there was nowhere to hide from enemies who could calculate trajectories with perfect accuracy. The extermination rays cut through crowds like a scythe through grain. Sith warriors and Imperial troops responded with desperate courage. Turbo laser emplacements swiveled toward the sky, unleashing torrents of plasma fire. Dozens of starfighters launched from military bases, their pilots grim-faced and determined. And from the Dark Temple itself, Sith Lords emerged, not the ancient council members, but the younger generation, hungry to prove themselves where Thanaton had failed. Lord Kallus, a Twi'lek Dark Lord known for his mastery of Sith lightning, led the counterattack. He stood atop a citadel's highest tower, arms raised, channeling the dark side through himself until purple-white energy crackled around his entire body. Then he released it in a focused beam that could have atomized a starfighter. The bolt struck a Dalek dead center. The creature's casing glowed red-hot, its systems overloading. For a moment, Kallus thought he'd succeeded. Then the Daleks' emergency protocols activated, rerouting power, and it remained operational, damaged but functional. Sith Force lightning, analyzing, the Dalek intoned even as it returned fire. Electrical discharge similar to standard energy weapons. Countermeasures. Implementing. The next bolt of Force lightning was absorbed by the Dalek's modified casing, its surface now reconfigured to act as a grounding conductor. The energy dispersed harmlessly. Kallus had exactly enough time to realize what had happened before the extermination ray hit him. Across the city, the pattern repeated. Sith warriors used telekinesis to hurl rubble at the Daleks. The creature's hover systems compensated, dodging with inhuman precision. Force users attempted mental domination. The Daleks' minds were so fundamentally alien that the Force found no purchase, sliding off mechanical intelligence like water off Durasteel. Physical attacks with lightsabers managed to damage some casings, but the Daleks learned to maintain distance, their weapons outranging melee combatants. The Imperial military fared better initially. Massed turbo laser fire destroyed nearly 30 Daleks in the first hour of fighting, their armor finally succumbing to sustained bombardment. Starfighters using swarm tactics managed to isolate and eliminate individual Daleks, their pilots using suicide runs when ammunition ran dry. But for every Dalek destroyed, civilians died by the hundreds. The creatures showed no fear, no hesitation, no mercy. They calculated optimal firing solutions and executed them with perfect accuracy. When a building collapsed on 3 Daleks, burying them in tons of rubble, they simply used their temporal shift technology to phase through the debris and continue their extermination. In the Imperial Command Center 3 kilometers beneath the city, General Arcos watched the tactical display with mounting despair. Red icons representing Dalek positions spread across the map like a plague. Blue icons, his forces, blinked out one by one. Artillery batteries 7 and 12 are silent, an officer reported, voice tight. Dalek units have reached the residential sectors, civilian casualties estimated at 50,000 and climbing. Evacuate the lower levels, Arcos ordered, his military training overriding panic. Pull all units back to defensive positions around the Dark Temple. If we can concentrate our fire. General! The sensor officer's shout cut through the organized chaos. Multiple temporal signatures detected. They're bringing in reinforcements. On the main view screen, the temporal rift above the city expanded. Through it, more Daleks emerged, not dozens but hundreds. A full invasion fleet, each unit equipped with weapons, refined through 2 weeks of analyzing Sith combat footage. Arcos felt ice settle in his stomach. Contact the Dark Council. Tell them we need the Emperor. On the streets above, the battle had evolved into desperate last stands. A group of Sith acolytes fought back to back in a plaza, their lightsabers weaving defensive patterns as they tried to protect refugees fleeing toward underground shelters. A Dalek targeting algorithm identified the most skilled combatant, a young human woman who'd already destroyed 2 units by exploiting damaged armor seams, and assigned 3 units to her elimination. She died protecting a child who'd frozen in terror. But not all the defenders were conventional warriors. From the Dark Temple's lowest levels emerged a figure wrapped in tattered robes, his face hidden behind a mask of ancient Sith origin. Lord Scourge, the Emperor's wrath, immortal servant bound by dark side rituals that predated the modern empire. He had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, had fought Jedi and Sith, Republic soldiers and Imperial traitors, but he had never seen anything like the Daleks. Scourge moved through the battlefield like a ghost, his crimson lightsaber a blur of motion. Unlike younger Sith, he didn't rely solely on Force powers. He used terrain, timing, and 300 years of combat experience. A Dalek targeted him. He ducked behind a massive Duracrete pillar, letting the beam score stone instead of flesh. As the Dalek rotated to reacquire, Scourge was already moving, closing distance in a Force-enhanced sprint. His lightsaber struck the eye stalk first, the one sensor system every Dalek relied upon. Sparks erupted. Blinded, the creature fired wildly. Scourge rolled underneath the casing and drove his blade upward, finding the joint where armor plating met the central housing. The plasma cut through, deep and precise. The Dalek died screaming a mechanical death shriek. But there were too many. Even Scourge, for all his skill, was just one warrior. He destroyed 7 more before a Dalek patrol cornered him in a collapsed building. They fired in sequence, their beams converging on his position. Scourge called on the Force, creating a barrier of pure dark side energy, and felt it crack under the sustained assault. Just before his defenses failed, a massive surge in the Force shook the entire city. Every Force-sensitive being for 1,000 kilometers felt it, a presence so vast, so incomprehensibly powerful, that it was like standing before a black hole made of malice and will. The Sith Emperor had awakened. High above Kos City, the Daleks detected a single biosignature rising from the Dark Temple. Their sensors classified it as humanoid. One life sign among millions. They calculated its trajectory, assigned a standard extermination priority, and prepared to eliminate it. They should have paid more attention to what their instruments were actually reading. The life sign wasn't just humanoid. It was burning with an energy signature their sensors couldn't properly quantify. An entire dimension of reality they had no framework to understand. The Emperor rose into the storm, and for the first time since arriving in this universe, the Daleks encountered something that made their threat assessment algorithms return an error. Analyze, the lead Dalek commanded. Unable to analyze. Energy readings exceed sensor parameters. Threat level, undefined. The Emperor raised one hand. Across the city, 50 Daleks simultaneously imploded, their Dalekanium armor crumpling like paper under invisible pressure as the Force itself crushed them. The temporal technology, so effective against physical laws, found no purchase against a power that existed outside conventional physics. Another gesture. Lightning, not the purple-black electricity Sith Lords channeled, but raw force energy that existed at the boundary between matter and energy, leapt from the Emperor's fingers and arced between Dalek positions. 20 units exploded, their systems overloading in cascading failure. The Daleks, for the first time in their conquest of the Sith Empire, experienced something approaching surprise. Revised threat assessment, the command unit transmitted. Priority Alpha target identified. All units, concentrate fire. Every Dalek weapon in Ka City turned toward the Emperor. 200 extermination rays fired simultaneously, their beams converging on a single point. The Emperor caught them. All of them. The energy hung suspended in midair around him, held in place by will alone. Then he redirected it, the beams scattering back toward their sources like shrapnel from an explosion. 47 Daleks died in the counterattack, destroyed by their own weapons. But the Daleks adapted. They always adapted. Temporal shifts activated across the fleet, units phasing in and out of normal time, making themselves impossible targets. Others deployed experimental weapons, devices that attempted to manipulate local time-space, to age the Emperor rapidly or trap him in temporal loops. And in that moment, both sides realized the same terrifying truth. This would not be a quick war. The Force was powerful beyond Dalek calculations, but they had weapons and technology that could counter even its most devastating applications. Neither side could be certain of victory. The Emperor descended back to the Dark Temple, his power temporarily exhausted. The Daleks withdrew to Korriban to reassess and reinforce. Behind them, Ka City burned. 73,000 civilians dead. 40% of the military garrison destroyed, and both the Sith Empire and the Daleks now understood exactly what kind of war they were fighting. Total, absolute, existential. There would be no surrender, no negotiation, no mercy, only extermination or extinction. In the aftermath of the Ka City massacre, the Sith Empire stood at a crossroads. Traditional warfare had failed. Force lightning, telekinesis, even the Emperor's overwhelming power, all effective but not decisive. The Daleks adapted too quickly, learned too efficiently. Each encounter provided them data to counter Sith abilities more effectively. Darth Mortis saw opportunity in that pattern. He was old even by Sith standards, his body sustained by dark side rituals that should have been forgotten millennia ago. While other council members screamed for mobilization and revenge, Mortis descended into the deepest vaults beneath the Dark Temple, where knowledge too dangerous even for Sith was kept locked away. He sought the forbidden art of Sith alchemy, not the crude flesh warping practiced by lesser lords, but the ancient science that had transformed the original Sith species, that had created monsters and weapons from living essence itself. If the Force couldn't destroy the Daleks directly, perhaps it could corrupt them, remake them, turn their greatest strength, their technology, into a weapon against them. Mortis's laboratory occupied a chamber carved from solid bedrock, its walls inscribed with formulae that predated the Republic. Here, under plasma light and surrounded by containment fields, he studied the remains of Daleks destroyed in Kos City. His apprentices, 3 talented alchemists he'd trained personally, assisted with fearful reverence. "The armor is remarkable," Mortis murmured, running aged fingers across a cracked section of Dalekanium casing. "Self-repairing, energy-dispersing, even partially temporal in nature, exists in multiple states simultaneously. Fascinating." "Master," one apprentice ventured, "the Council demands results. They expect new weapons, new countermeasures. They don't understand what you're attempting." "The Council never understands," Mortis replied absently, peeling back armor plating to expose the machinery beneath. Circuit-like systems, but not quite. Power conduits that seem to generate energy rather than merely conduct it. And at the core... Here, look. The apprentices leaned in and recoiled immediately. Inside the armored shell rested an organic creature, the Dalek mutant itself. A bloated, tentacled thing that pulsed with hateful life, its single eye glaring even in death. The biological component of a supposedly mechanical race. "They're not droids," Mortis breathed, revelation lighting his face. "They're cyborgs, organic beings encased in technology, which means..." He trailed off, already planning. If they were organic, they could be corrupted, changed, rewritten by Sith alchemy. But the true genius of Mortis's plan wasn't to corrupt a single Dalek. That would take months, perhaps years, time they didn't have, with hundreds more arriving through the temporal rift daily. No, he would corrupt their technology itself. Create a dark side virus, a living corruption that could spread through Dalek systems like disease through flesh. He called his creation the Twilight Plague. For 3 weeks, as the war raged across a dozen worlds, Mortis worked in isolation. He extracted samples from destroyed Daleks, analyzed their power systems, and used Sith alchemy to create something that existed at the boundary between technology and biology. A nanoscopic construct infused with dark side energy, designed to infiltrate Dalek systems and rewrite their core programming. Not to destroy them, that would be wasteful. To enslave them. The Dark Council, desperate for any advantage, approved his plan with disturbing unanimity. The first field test occurred on Korriban. A Sith strike team, led by Scourge and supported by Republic defector Jedi Master Atris, a recent convert to the dark side, infiltrated the Dalek occupation zone. Their mission: plant Mortis's device within range of the primary Dalek command unit. They lost 12 warriors getting close enough, but Scourge succeeded, hurling the spherical device into a cluster of Daleks before vanishing into the tombs. The Twilight Plague activated. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The Daleks continued their patrol patterns, weapons tracking potential threats with mechanical precision. Then their casings began to change. Bronze and gold plating darkened, taking on a crimson-black hue like dried blood. The eye stalks developed a sickly purple glow. "System anomaly," one Dalek transmitted, its voice distorted. "Organic contamination detected." But it was already too late. The plague had integrated with their systems, and Sith alchemy didn't merely corrupt, it transformed. The Daleks' advanced AI, designed for pure logic and extermination doctrine, found itself infected with something illogical, emotional, dark. The first transformed Dalek turned its weapon on its companions. Brothers, no, weakness. Strength through passion. The other Daleks, uncorrupted, immediately recognized the infection. Contaminated unit detected. Purge protocols initiated. They destroyed the corrupted Dalek without hesitation, but spores from its shattered casing spread, carrying the Twilight Plague to other units. Within an hour, 30 Daleks on Korriban had become something new, something hybrid. Mortis watched the live feed in his laboratory with savage satisfaction. It works. The alchemy bonds with their technology, rewrites their purpose. They're becoming our servants despite themselves. But he had made a critical error. He had assumed the Daleks' response would be slow, uncertain. He had assumed they would be paralyzed by internal conflict. Instead, the Daleks responded with absolute pragmatism. Every unit on Korriban simultaneously activated self-destruct protocols. 200 explosions blossomed across the Valley of the Dark Lords as the entire occupation force chose extinction over corruption. Within seconds, every Dalek on the planet was destroyed, corrupted and uncorrupted alike. The temporal rift remained open, but no reinforcements came through. In the Dark Council chamber, Mortis received the news with growing dread. They destroyed themselves? Willingly. Transmission detected, an intelligence officer reported. Broadcasting on all frequencies. It's a message from the Dalek fleet. The holographic display activated. A single Dalek appeared, its casing pristine, its eye stalk glowing with cold intelligence. Scythe alchemical weapon detected, analyzed, countermeasures implemented. Dalek. Technological superiority, absolute. Organic corruption attempts, futile. The Dalek paused, and when it continued, there was something almost like satisfaction in its electronic voice. Sith Empire has demonstrated resourcefulness, threat level, reassessed to maximum. In response, Dalek fleet. Escalation protocols activated. Temporal reinforcements incoming. Estimated arrival 72 hours. Another pause. Counter-adaptation complete. Anti-alchemical shielding implemented. Biological corruption no longer viable strategy. Scythe Empire extinction. Countdown initiated. The transmission ended. Mortis stood frozen, unable to comprehend what he'd just witnessed. The Daleks hadn't just countered his weapon, they'd analyzed it, adapted to it, and used the attempt as justification to escalate their invasion. And worse, they'd done it in 72 hours, what would have taken Sith alchemists years, developed a complete defense against dark side corruption. Scourge, present in the chamber, spoke the words everyone was thinking. They're learning from us. Every attack teaches them. Every weapon we deploy becomes obsolete within days, and now we've provoked them into bringing their full force. Darth Marr's voice was grim. How many? How many more are coming? The intelligence officer checked his instruments, face going pale. Sensor readings from the Korriban rift suggest thousands, perhaps tens of thousands. The temporal signature is growing exponentially. Across the Empire, Sith Lords felt a collective chill. They had thrown their best weapons at the Daleks, force powers, advanced military tactics, forbidden alchemy. Each time, the mechanized horrors adapted and returned stronger. The Emperor himself could destroy hundreds, but against thousands? Tens of thousands? For the first time in Sith history, they faced an enemy that might actually exterminate them. Not conquer, not dominate. Simply delete them from existence with mechanical efficiency. And in his laboratory, surrounded by the remnants of his failed creation, Darth Mortis realized his gambit had done more than fail. It had taught the Daleks that even the dark side's deepest mysteries could be countered with sufficient analysis. He had given them the final piece of data they needed to wage total war against Force users. The extinction countdown had begun. The message reached the Jedi Temple on Coruscant 3 days after Mortis's failed gambit. It came through a wounded Republic scout ship that had jumped blindly through hyperspace, its crew dead except for one traumatized ensign. His recording showed Dalek extermination raids on neutral worlds bordering Sith space, worlds that owed allegiance to neither Empire nor Republic. The Jedi High Council convened immediately. "Mechanical killers from outside our galaxy," Master Vandar Tokare observed, his ancient eyes troubled. "Exterminating all organic life without distinction between Sith and civilian. The Force itself recoils from their presence." Master Vrook Lamar, ever pragmatic, crossed his arms. The Sith brought this upon themselves. Whatever experiment or ritual summoned these Daleks, it's Empire business. We cannot commit Republic forces to save our enemies. Can't we? Master Kavar leaned forward, his scarred face thoughtful. These Daleks don't distinguish between Sith and Republic citizens. They're exterminating refugees, neutral traders, entire colonies. If they finish with the Empire, do we believe they'll simply leave? Silence settled across the chamber. Through the Force, they could all sense the disturbance, a cold void spreading across the galaxy where worlds had once thrived. Not the corrupting darkness of the Sith, but something worse, an absence, places where the Force itself seemed diminished. "The enemy of my enemy," Master Zez-Kai El said carefully, "is not necessarily our friend, but perhaps the enemy of all life is everyone's concern." The debate raged for hours. Some council members argued for defensive preparation, fortify Republic borders, let the Empire and Daleks destroy each other. Others insisted that the Jedi Code demanded they protect all life, even Sith life, from extermination. A few suggested this was the Force's will, pruning the dark side's corruption from the galaxy. Finally, Grandmaster Satel Shan, young for her position but wise beyond her years, made the decision. "We will not ally with the Sith Empire," she declared. "But we will not stand idle while entire worlds burn. The Republic will offer humanitarian aid to refugee populations. And," she paused, the weight of history on her shoulders, "we will share intelligence on the Daleks with any Force fighting them. Sith included." "Grandmaster," Vrook protested, "you cannot mean to help them." "I mean to help the innocent beings they failed to protect," Satile corrected. "If sharing tactical data about the Daleks keeps more civilians alive, then it aligns with our principles. What the Sith do with that information is their choice." The Council's vote was narrow, but the decision stood. Within days, Jedi envoys arrived at the edge of Sith space, bearing data crystals and medical supplies. The reception was predictably hostile. Sith warriors nearly executed the Jedi on sight. Only Darth Mar's direct intervention prevented bloodshed. "They come bearing gifts." Mar's masked face betrayed no emotion as he examined the data crystal. "The Jedi offering aid to the Sith. Either you're more desperate than we thought, or this is an elaborate trap." The lead envoy, a Miraluka Jedi named Aaron K., bowed respectfully despite the dozen lightsabers pointed at her heart. "Neither, Lord Mar. We've analyzed the Daleks from refugee reports and intercepted transmissions. They see no difference between Empire and Republic. When they finish exterminating you, they'll come for us. This is pragmatism, not friendship." Mar activated the crystal. Holographic data filled the chamber. Jedi analysis of Dalek technology, proposed countermeasures, philosophical assessments of their apparent immunity to Force mental attacks. Information that had cost the Republic dearly to acquire, now freely given. "Why?" Mar demanded. "What do you gain from this?" "Time," Aaron replied simply. "Every day the Daleks spend fighting the Empire is another day for the Republic to prepare defenses. And," she hesitated, "every life saved from extermination, Sith or not, is still a life. The Force encompasses all living things, even you," Darth Ravage sneered. "Jedi sentiment, weakness disguised as philosophy." "Perhaps," Aaron conceded, "but we're not the ones losing worlds to mechanical extermination. Pride is expensive, Lord Ravage. Can the Empire afford it?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Mar studied the Jedi for a long moment, then dismissed her with a wave. "Return to your Republic. Tell your council we acknowledge their data. Nothing more." After the Jedi departed, the Dark Council reviewed the intelligence in detail. The Republic's scientists had made several key discoveries. Dalek armor was vulnerable to sustained kinetic impact rather than energy weapons. Their eye stalks were critical sensors, blind them, and their accuracy dropped significantly. And most importantly, their temporal technology required immense power, forced them into prolonged engagement, and their most dangerous abilities became less viable. "The Jedi give us weapons to fight our common enemy," Darth Vowron mused. "How magnanimous, how strategic. They're not saving us, they're buying time to save themselves." "Does it matter?" Darth Acina asked. "The information is accurate. We can use this." "It matters," Darth Mortis interjected, "because it means the Jedi are afraid. Truly afraid. If they see extinction coming for us and know we're inadequate to stop it." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Outside the Dark Temple, Sith warriors began retrofitting weapons based on Republic data. Slug throwers, primitive ballistic weapons, were pulled from armories and distributed. The projectiles couldn't be deflected or absorbed like energy weapons. Against Dalekanium armor, they were marginally more effective. Marginally. But in a war of extermination, margins mattered. Meanwhile, on Coruscant, Master Satele stood alone in the Jedi Council chamber, gazing out at the endless cityscape. She felt the disturbance in the Force growing stronger with each passing day, the cold void spreading, and she wondered if she'd made the right choice. "We bought them time," Master Kavar said, joining her at the window. "Perhaps weeks, perhaps only days." "And bought ourselves the same," Satele replied. "The Daleks are coming, Master Kavar, for all of us. The only question is whether we'll face them divided or if we'll have learned something before the end." Across the galaxy, three forces now moved toward collision. The Sith Empire, fighting desperately for survival. The Republic, fortifying borders while claiming neutrality. And the Daleks, whose reinforcements poured through the temporal rift in numbers that darkened the skies above Korriban. The extinction countdown continued, and none of the galaxy's great powers were ready for what came next. The sacred Sith world of Ziost had stood inviolate for 3,000 years. Its surface was a monument to dark side power, ancient temples, meditation chambers carved into frozen mountains, and the legendary orbital defense grid that could repel entire fleets. 20 Sith Lords maintained permanent residence, their combined power creating a nexus so strong that the planet itself seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. The Daleks chose Ziost for their primary beachhead precisely because of this power concentration. They arrived not through the Korriban Rift, but by creating a new one. Temporal technology, refined and amplified, tore open a wound in space directly above Ziost's northern hemisphere. Through it came the vanguard of the Dalek Time War Fleet, 5,000 units equipped with anti-alchemical shielding, enhanced armor plating, and weapons specifically calibrated to counter Force abilities. The orbital defense grid opened fire immediately. Thousands of turbo-laser batteries unleashed concentrated hell, filling the void with enough firepower to glass a continent. Daleks died by the hundreds in the initial barrage, their casings unable to withstand such overwhelming force. But hundreds from 5,000 still left thousands. The surviving Daleks descended in perfect formation, their targeting computers identifying and eliminating defense emplacements with mechanical precision. Orbital stations exploded in silent fury. The defense grid, pride of the Sith Empire, lasted 17 minutes before going dark. On the surface, Sith Lords felt the disturbance and mobilized. This was their ground, their power. Here, where the dark side was strongest, they would demonstrate why the Force was supreme. Lord Brontes led the defense, a human woman whose face bore the ritual scars of someone who'd touched the deepest mysteries of Sith sorcery. She stood atop the Grand Temple's highest spire, surrounded by 20 Dark Lords, each a master of their chosen discipline. Together, they formed a circle of power that had never been assembled in living memory. "Now," Brontes commanded, "show these machines what the dark side truly means." The ritual began. 20 voices chanting in the ancient Sith language, words that predated the Republic by millennia. Dark side energy gathered like a storm, pulling power from every shadow, every hateful thought, every drop of suffering that had ever occurred on Ziost. The very planet responded, its nexus awakening. Above them, the Daleks detected the energy surge. Massive force disturbance, threat level, maximum, implementing countermeasures. The countermeasures failed. You couldn't calculate the incalculable. The Sith weren't using technology. They were bending reality itself through sheer will and passion. Brontes released the ritual. A wave of pure dark side energy exploded outward from the temple, invisible but devastating. It struck the descending Dalek fleet like a tsunami of hatred made manifest. Daleks screamed, actually screamed, as the Force invaded their casings, found the organic mutants within, and inflicted upon them every fear, every pain, every moment of existential terror their genetically engineered psychology was capable of experiencing. 300 Daleks fell from the sky, their occupants dead from psychic overload before their casings hit the ground. The Sith Lords collapsed, drained but triumphant. They had proven the Force could hurt even these invaders. The remaining Daleks analyzed what had occurred, adjusted their approach, and continued their descent. They had lost 300 units, acceptable casualties. The Sith ritual had required 20 powerful Force users working in concert and had exhausted them completely. The exchange ratio was favorable. Sith Force capabilities, extreme at concentrated nexus points, the Dalek command unit transmitted. Solution: eliminate nexus structures. Commence orbital bombardment. Dalek ships, actual starships that had followed the Vanguard through the rift, emerged from hyperspace. They weren't elegant like Republic cruisers or menacing like Sith dreadnoughts. They were geometric, functional, and absolutely covered in weapons. The bombardment began. Ziost's temples. Those monuments to 3,000 years of dark side history vanished under antimatter explosions. The Grand Temple, where Brontes and her circle still recovered, took a direct hit. The mountain it was built into simply ceased to exist, replaced by a crater 10 kilometers wide. 20 of the Empire's most powerful Sith Lords died in an instant, their power meaningless against weapons that could unmake matter. The message was clear. The Daleks had learned. Force concentrations were dangerous, so eliminate the places that allowed such concentrations. Reduce every battle to individual combatants versus overwhelming numbers. Turn every strength into a vulnerability. On the surface, Sith warriors fought with desperate courage as Daleks established landing zones. General Arcos, promoted after Ka City's defense, coordinated the Imperial military response. His troops used the Republic data, targeting eye stalks with slug throwers, using terrain to break line of sight, forcing the Daleks into close quarters where their extermination rays were less effective. It worked. Barely. Imperial casualties were horrific, but they managed to establish a defensive perimeter around the few remaining population centers. Then the Daleks deployed their temporal weapons en masse. Reality stuttered across the battlefield. Entire sections of the defensive line simply weren't there anymore. erased from the timeline. Imperial troops found themselves suddenly flanked by enemies who'd shifted through time itself. And worst of all, the Daleks began targeting infrastructure retroactively. A command bunker blinked out of existence. It hadn't been destroyed. It had never been built. The officers who'd been inside suddenly found themselves standing in open air, confused just before Dalek weapons found them. General Arcos watched his carefully constructed defenses unravel in real time. This is impossible. They're changing history itself. Not history, a cold voice corrected. He turned to find Darth Mar had arrived, leading reinforcements from Dromund Kos. They're changing the present by altering the immediate past, time manipulation on a tactical scale. We can't fight this conventionally. Then how do we fight it? Arcos demanded. Mar's masked face turned toward the sky, where more Dalek ships continued arriving. We don't. We survive. We make them pay for every meter in blood and time and resources until they decide Ziost costs more than it's worth. But even as he said it, Mar knew the truth. The Daleks didn't calculate cost the way organics did. They calculated efficiency, and exterminating a planet full of Force users who could potentially threaten their conquest, that was supremely efficient. The battle for Ziost raged for 6 days. The Sith Empire threw everything they had at the invasion. Fleets, armies, Force wielders of every discipline. They used every tactic the Republic data suggested and invented new ones born of desperation. They killed nearly 1,000 Daleks, lost 2 million defenders, and in the end evacuated the planet entirely. Ziost, sacred world of the Sith, fell to the Daleks. Its temples were rubble, its nexus points were craters. Its power was ash. Standing aboard the last evacuating transport, Darth Mar watched his world burn and understood what the war had become. This wasn't conquest. The Daleks weren't trying to rule the Empire. They were methodically erasing it. One world at a time, one population at a time, one nexus point at a time. "How many worlds can we afford to lose?" an officer asked quietly. Mar didn't answer. He didn't need to. The Empire controlled perhaps 100 inhabited worlds. The Daleks had 5,000 units at Ziost alone, and more arriving every day through rifts they could apparently open at will. The mathematics were simple, brutal, final. Unless something changed, the Sith Empire had perhaps 6 months before complete extinction, and the Republic, fortifying its borders and pretending neutrality, could save them. They had perhaps a year before the Daleks finished with the Sith and turned their attention to the galaxy's other organic infestation. The countdown continued, and the numbers were not favorable. The war entered its 3rd month with Sith territory reduced by 40%. 12 worlds exterminated, their populations deleted with mechanical efficiency. 15 more under active invasion, their defenders fighting desperate holding actions that everyone knew would eventually fail. The Dark Council had relocated 3 times, always staying one step ahead of Dalek temporal reconnaissance. But retreat was not the Sith way, and in desperation, old hatreds became temporarily negotiable. The meeting occurred on a neutral station in the borderlands between Republic and Empire space. The location's coordinates were encrypted, changed hourly, and protected by both Jedi Knights and Sith Lords, an unprecedented security arrangement that would have been unthinkable 4 months ago. Darth Mar represented the Empire. Grandmaster Satley Shan spoke for the Republic. Between them, a holographic display showed the spreading Dalek invasion in brutal detail. "You're losing," Satley stated without preamble. "Another month and the Empire ceases to exist as a functional government." "We're aware," Mar replied, his masked face impossible to read, but his tone carrying undercurrents of controlled fury. "And the Republic prepares for the same fate." The Daleks established a beachhead in the Tingalarm last week. Neutral worlds, Republic protectorates, they don't care about your claimed neutrality. Satele's expression tightened. She'd received the same reports. Dalek scouts probing Republic space, testing defenses, analyzing fleet compositions. The extermination would come to the Republic. It was merely a question of when. The Council remains divided, she admitted. Many believe defending Republic borders is sufficient. Others... She paused, choosing words carefully. Others recognize that borders are meaningless against an enemy that can open temporal rifts anywhere they choose. Your masters are fools, Mar said bluntly. Borders. The Daleks care nothing for borders. They care about efficiency. They'll finish exterminating us, consolidate their forces, and fall upon the Republic with overwhelming superiority. Your defensive preparations buy you weeks at most. Then what do you propose? Mar leaned forward. An alliance, temporary, pragmatic. We share everything. Tactical data, force techniques, military resources, combined fleet operations. Coordinated strikes against Dalek beachheads before they can consolidate. The Republic allied with the Sith Empire. Satele's voice was flat. Do you understand what you're asking? Centuries of war, countless dead on both sides. The Jedi Code itself forbids. Your code will matter exactly nothing when the Daleks exterminate every Force user in the galaxy, Mar interrupted. Light side, dark side, they don't distinguish. They see Force wielders as a threat to eliminate. Period. Satele closed her eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choice. Through the Force, she sensed the same conflict in every Jedi across the Republic. Ally with the Sith, or maintain principles and face extinction separately. There would be conditions, she said finally. Strict ones. No Sith aggression against Republic citizens. No dark side corruption attempts. Full transparency on all military operations. And the moment the Dalek threat ends, if it ends, this alliance dissolves immediately. Agreed, Mar said without hesitation. The Emperor himself has authorized this negotiation. He wants survival, not philosophy debates. That gave Satele pause. The Sith Emperor, the immortal being who'd consumed entire planets to sustain his power, was willing to ally with the Jedi. The Daleks had achieved what centuries of warfare could not. They'd made the impossible necessary. Over the next week, military coordinators from both sides hammered out the details. It was contentious, bitter, and fraught with mutual suspicion. Sith Lords and Jedi Knights had to work side by side, sharing intelligence while suppressing the urge to ignite lightsabers and finish old grudges. But slowly, pragmatism won. The first joint operation targeted a Dalek consolidation point on the agricultural world of Botawui. Intelligence suggested 200 Dalek units preparing to use the planet as a staging ground for deeper Republic incursions. The combined fleet arrived in overwhelming force. 30 Sith dreadnoughts and 40 Republic capital ships supported by hundreds of starfighters and dropships carrying both Jedi and Sith ground forces. The Daleks, for once, appeared surprised. Their sensors detected the fleet composition, unprecedented cooperation between historic enemies, and their threat assessment algorithms struggled to calculate appropriate response. Anomaly detected. The Dalek command unit transmitted. Republic and Scythe forces acting in concert. Probability of alliance previously calculated at 0.03%. Reassessing organic behavioral patterns. The Daleks had made their first significant miscalculation. They had assumed organic hatred and pride would prevent cooperation. They had counted on the Republic and Empire destroying each other, while Dalek forces methodically exterminated the survivors. Now they faced a combined fleet with unified tactical doctrine. The Battle of Bothaui lasted 8 hours. Republic ships used advanced shielding to protect Sith vessels during approach. Sith weapons, designed for overwhelming offense, punched through Dalek ship armor while Republic starfighters provided cover. On the ground, Jedi and Sith worked in coordinated strikes. Jedi using Force push to destabilize Daleks, while Sith followed with lightning attacks to exploit damaged systems. It was messy, improvised, and neither side fully trusted the other. But it worked. By battle's end, 173 Daleks were destroyed at the cost of 8 capital ships and perhaps 1,000 combined casualties. By the grim mathematics of the war, it was a victory. The first real victory either side had achieved. But as Republic and Sith forces regrouped in orbit, the celebrations were muted. Because everyone understood the same brutal truth. They'd concentrated nearly a quarter of both militaries to destroy fewer than 200 Daleks, and intelligence suggested there were tens of thousands more arriving through rifts across former Sith space. Satele stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching Sith dreadnoughts form up alongside Republic cruisers in a sight that would have been unthinkable months ago. Master Kavar joined her, his expression troubled. "We won," he said quietly. "Why does it feel like a defeat?" "Because we threw everything we had at a minor Dalek outpost," Satele replied. "And we barely succeeded. The Daleks have dozens of major staging grounds, hundreds of minor ones, and they're still bringing reinforcements through their rifts." She pulled up the strategic display, showing Dalek positions spreading across the galaxy like a plague. Red icons marking exterminated worlds, orange for active invasions, yellow for probed territories. "We bought time," Satele continued, "perhaps weeks, perhaps a month. But unless we find a way to close those temporal rifts, to stop the reinforcements." She didn't finish. Kavar understood. "We're just slowing our extinction, not preventing it." Aboard Darth Mar's flagship, the Dark Lord held a similar conversation with Darth Vowron. "The Jedi fought well," Vowron admitted grudgingly. "Their defensive techniques complemented our offensive power. Together we were effective. Effective enough to survive one battle," Mar corrected. "Not effective enough to win the war. The Daleks will adapt to our combined tactics, just as they adapted to everything else. Next time, they'll be ready for Republic-Sith cooperation." "Then what do we do?" Mar stared at the holographic display, at the spreading contamination of Dalek occupation. "We keep fighting. We make every world, every system, every meter of space cost them. We force them to calculate whether exterminating us is worth the resources, and we hope," he paused, the word clearly distasteful, "that somewhere in this galaxy, someone finds a weapon that can actually hurt them permanently." The alliance had formed. Republic and Empire, Jedi and Sith, united against existential threat. It was historic, unprecedented, potentially galaxy-changing. And both sides knew with cold certainty that it probably wouldn't be enough. The Daleks were coming, in numbers that darkened skies, with technology that bent time itself, motivated by hatred so pure it transcended emotion into mechanical certainty. And against that tide, even united, the galaxy's greatest powers were merely buying time until extinction. The Sith Emperor had not spoken publicly in centuries. His will was enforced through the Dark Council, his power channeled through intermediaries, his physical form hidden within the depths of his fortress on Dromund Kos. Most citizens believed him a myth, a legend the Council perpetuated to maintain authority. But Darth Mar knew better, and as the war ground toward its 4th month with no end in sight, he made the journey that few Sith survived, into the Emperor's throne room. The chamber existed outside normal space, accessible only through force-guided rituals that would drive lesser beings mad. Mar walked corridors that folded through impossible dimensions, past shadows that whispered secrets mortals weren't meant to hear. Finally, he entered a vast darkness broken only by a single throne of black stone. The Emperor sat motionless. His body withered, but his presence vast enough to crush minds. When he spoke, the words came from everywhere and nowhere. "You seek answers I do not possess, Lord Mar. The Daleks exist outside the Force. I can destroy their physical forms, but they are hollow, empty. Beings of such singular purpose that even the dark side finds no purchase." "Then we're doomed," Mar stated flatly. "Everything we've tried fails. Alliance with the Republic buys us weeks at most. The Daleks adapt faster than we can innovate. Perhaps," the Emperor's eyes burning with terrible power, focused on Mar, "or perhaps we have been fighting the wrong war. Explain." "The Daleks came through a rift, a tear between universes, opened by accident during Sith alchemical experiments." The Emperor's voice held something almost like self-recrimination. "My servants sought to tap dimensional energies. Instead, they opened a door. What came through cannot be sealed by conventional means because it anchors itself in our reality through temporal technology." Mar's mind raced. "Then we destroy the anchor, close the rift permanently. You cannot destroy what you cannot reach. The primary rift on Korriban is defended by thousands of Daleks. They know it's their lifeline. They've fortified it beyond our capability to assault. Then we find another way. Strike at their staging grounds, their command structures, They have no command structure as we understand it," the Emperor interrupted. "Each Dalek is autonomous, yet perfectly coordinated. Kill their leaders and others simply assume those roles. There is no center to cut out, no vital organ to pierce." Mar felt despair clawing at the edges of his discipline. "Then what do you suggest?" The Emperor was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried weight that made reality tremble. "I suggest we stop trying to defeat them, and instead we make them leave." "How?" "The Daleks seek purity, supremacy, the extermination of all inferior life. They see the Force as a threat to that purity, an energy they cannot control or calculate. But they also possess temporal technology, which means they can travel not just through space, but through time." Understanding dawned in Mar's mind. "You want to negotiate. I want to offer them something more valuable than our extermination, a trade." The Emperor leaned forward, and for the first time, Mar saw something like desperation in those ancient eyes. "The Daleks want to eliminate threats to their supremacy. Very well, we give them information about threats far greater than the Sith Empire, threats from their own universe, threats they could return to fight instead of wasting resources on a galaxy that, ultimately, is too costly to fully exterminate. You would bargain with them? The Sith Emperor negotiating?" "I would survive," the Emperor said coldly, "as would the Empire. Pride is worthless if we're extinct." It was madness. It was unprecedented. It was also the only strategy that didn't end in total annihilation. But while the Emperor plotted desperate gambits, the war continued. On a dozen worlds, Sith and Republic forces fought holding actions against Dalek extermination campaigns, and in the laboratories of both powers, scientists and Force users worked frantically to find any advantage. It was a Republic research team that made the breakthrough. Dr. Gorman Sheck, a physicist who'd been studying the captured Dalek remains, noticed something curious. The creature's temporal technology left traces, quantum signatures that existed slightly out of phase with normal space-time, and those signatures could be tracked. "It's like a ripple in water," Shek explained to Master Satele. "Every time they use temporal shift technology, they leave a disturbance. We can't predict where they'll appear, but we can detect when they've recently used it. And if we can detect it, we can anticipate their movements," Satle finished. "How accurate?" 70, maybe 80%. Not perfect, but enough to prepare ambushes. Enough to stop being reactive and start being proactive. The technology was shared immediately with Sith forces. Within days, both militaries had deployed temporal sensors across key systems. The tactical advantage was immediate. Dalek forces suddenly found themselves walking into prepared defenses, their element of surprise nullified. At the Battle of Begarin, Republic forces detected temporal signatures hours before the Dalek assault. By the time the invasion fleet arrived, they faced massed artillery, minefields, and a combined Jedi-Sith Force user strike team that had meditated for hours specifically to counter the attack. The Daleks lost 400 units. The defenders lost fewer than 300 soldiers. It wasn't enough to win the war, but it was enough to shift momentum, however slightly. The Daleks, for their part, recognized the change. Their sensors detected the new defensive technology. Their tactical algorithms processed the implications. Organic forces have adapted counter-temporal detection, the command network transmitted. Efficiency of temporal assault tactics reduced by 43%. Recommendation: escalate to full planetary extinction protocols. Across Dalek-occupied space, the strategy changed. Instead of systematic extermination followed by occupation, they began simply destroying worlds from orbit. Antimatter bombs that cracked planetary crusts, temporal weapons that aged continents into lifeless dust, biological agents that dissolved organic matter on contact. The message was clear. If they couldn't exterminate efficiently, they would exterminate absolutely. On Dromund Kos, Darth Maul received reports of 6 worlds rendered uninhabitable in a single week. Not conquered, not occupied, simply murdered, sterilized of all life and abandoned. "They're accelerating," he reported to the Dark Council. "Sacrificing efficiency for speed. They want us extinct before we can develop more countermeasures." "Then we accelerate as well," Darth Asina declared. "Every weapon, every ritual, every force technique we possess. Throw it all at them. If we're dying anyway, we take as many of these machines with us as possible." The chamber erupted in grim agreement. The Sith Empire, never one for measured response, prepared its final gambit. But in the darkness of his throne room, the Emperor had already set his own plan in motion. A message, encoded in quantum entanglement and temporal mathematics the Daleks would recognize, had been transmitted toward the Korriban Rift. It was a simple message: "We offer knowledge, a trade for survival." Whether the Daleks would even consider negotiation, whether beings of pure exterminatory hatred could be bargained with, remained to be seen. But as the 4th month of war ended with casualty counts climbing into the tens of millions and no end in sight, one thing was certain: the galaxy was changing. Ancient enemies were allies. Impossible technologies were being developed. And somewhere in the balance between Sith desperation and Republic resolve, between Dalek efficiency and Force user adaptability, the shape of the galaxy's future was being written in blood and fire. The war had evolved beyond simple extermination. Both sides now fought not just for victory, but for the right to exist at all. And in the space between heartbeats, the Force itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see which would prove stronger, the passion and will of organic life, or the cold calculation of mechanical hatred. The Emperor's message received a response 3 days later. Not words, but coordinates, a location in neutral space, equidistant from the Korriban Rift and Dromund Kos, and a time: 72 hours. The Dark Council was divided. Half viewed it as a trap, the Daleks luring them into a killing zone. The other half recognized it as their only alternative to slow extinction. In the end, the Emperor himself made the decision. He would attend, and he would bring the full might of the Sith Empire as insurance. The Republic, learning of the meeting through their intelligence-sharing agreement, demanded representation. Satele Shan insisted that if the Sith were negotiating with the Daleks, the Republic needed to be present. The alternative, a separate Sith-Dalek agreement, was unacceptable. "You don't trust us," Mar observed during the tense Hollow Conference. "No more than you trust us," Satele replied evenly. "But if there's even a possibility of ending this war without complete extinction, we all need to be part of the conversation." And so, in the 5th month of the war, an unprecedented gathering assembled in the void between stars. The Sith Emperor's personal flagship, surrounded by 24 dreadnoughts, Satele's command cruiser, escorted by 30 Republic warships, and emerging from a newly opened temporal rift, a single Dalek vessel, geometric and bristling with weapons that could unmake reality itself. The meeting occurred in a neutral conference chamber aboard a specially prepared station, one of the few places all three parties could exist without immediately trying to kill each other. The chamber itself was a study in contrasts: Sith darkness, Republic light, and the cold sterility the Daleks preferred. The Emperor entered first, his physical form surrounded by a corona of dark side energy, so intense it warped perception. Satele followed with Master Kavar and 3 other Jedi, their presence in the Force creating a counterbalance of light. And finally, 5 Daleks glided into the chamber, their eye stalks rotating to catalog every detail. For a long moment, no one spoke. The galaxy's greatest powers gathered in the same room for the first time in history. The lead Dalek broke the silence. "Sith Emperor, Jedi Grandmaster, you requested negotiation. State your proposal." The Emperor's voice resonated with barely controlled power. "You seek to exterminate all organic life in this galaxy. We propose an alternative. Leave. Return to your own universe. Redirect your resources to threats more worthy of your attention. Daleks do not negotiate. Daleks exterminate." "Then you are fools," the Emperor said coldly. "You've spent 5 months fighting us, lost thousands of units, and we've barely slowed you. Imagine what you could accomplish against enemies who actually threaten your supremacy instead of wasting resources on a galaxy that will take decades to fully sterilize. Dalek supremacy is absolute. No threats exist." "Liar." The Emperor's eyes blazed. "You came through a dimensional rift fleeing something. Your temporal technology suggests you've been engaged in a time war, a conflict so devastating it transcends normal space-time. You're refugees, not conquerors." The Daleks' eye stalks swiveled in perfect synchronization, fixing on the Emperor. For several seconds, they were silent. Then, "Explain how primitives possess this knowledge." "We've been studying you," Satele interjected, stepping forward. "Your technology, your tactics, your psychology. You're survivors of something catastrophic in your home universe. The Time War, you called it. Against enemies called Time Lords?" The Daleks' casings actually trembled, an unprecedented display of what might have been emotion. "Time Lords must be exterminated. Dalek destiny cannot be denied." "Then go exterminate them," the Emperor said. "Why waste time with us? We offer you information, full tactical data on everything we've learned about temporal mechanics through studying your technology. Research that could give you advantages against these Time Lords. In exchange, you leave our galaxy immediately and permanently. Daleks do not require primitive assistance. Don't you?" Mar's voice cut through the tension. He activated a holographic display showing Dalek casualty rates, resource expenditure, and projected timeline to complete galactic sterilization. You've lost 7,000 units in 5 months. At current rates, full extermination of Republic and Empire will take 20 years minimum. 20 years of resource drain while your true enemies grow stronger. The Daleks processed this. Their tactical algorithms ran scenarios, and for the first time they encountered a calculation that didn't favor immediate extermination. Proposal unacceptable. However, alternative exists. Name it, the Emperor commanded. Daleks will cease extermination operations in this galaxy. In exchange, Scythe and Jedi will provide complete biological and technological data on force manipulation, temporal mechanics research, and 20% of current combined military forces to serve as auxiliary units in Time War. The chamber erupted. Jedi and Sith both shouted protests. The idea of sending their own forces to fight in an alien conflict, of giving the Daleks access to Force knowledge, it was unthinkable. You ask us to become your slaves, Satele said, her voice hard. Incorrect. We demand mercenary forces, compensation. Your species survive. Alternative, extermination continues. Unacceptable, the Emperor declared. But his voice lacked its usual absolute certainty. Because the mathematics were brutal. Lose 20% of their forces to an alien war, or lose 100% to continued Dalek extermination. The negotiations devolved into heated argument. The Sith wanted to reject the offer outright, pride demanding they die fighting rather than become auxiliaries. The Jedi sought middle ground, trying to find terms that wouldn't compromise their principles. And the Daleks waited with mechanical patience, their calculations already complete. It was Satele who found the compromise. Counter-proposal, she said, silencing the chamber. We provide the data you request, but redacted. General force theory, basic temporal research, nothing that could be weaponized against us in future. We provide military advisors, not combat forces, to consult on organic tactics against Time Lords. 20 individuals, not 20% of our militaries. And in exchange, you not only cease operations here, but share technology for closing temporal rifts, ensuring you cannot return. The Daleks processed this for exactly 3 seconds. Acceptable. With addition, data must include force precognition techniques, essential for Time War operations. Both Jedi and Sith exchanged glances. Force precognition was powerful, but not immediately weaponizable. It required years of training, force sensitivity, and discipline the Daleks clearly lacked. Agreed, Satele said before anyone could protest. But the rift-closing technology comes first. No deal until we can verify it works. Agreed. What followed was the strangest treaty negotiation in galactic history. Sith Lords and Jedi Masters worked alongside Daleks to hammer out details, data exchange protocols, verification methods, exact specifications of what ceasing operations meant, the timeline for Dalek withdrawal. It took 48 hours. And at the end, when all parties signed the quantum encrypted agreement, the room felt surreal. They hadn't won. They hadn't defeated the Daleks. They'd simply made exterminating the galaxy more expensive than the Daleks were willing to pay. This is victory, Darth Ravage spat after the Daleks departed. We bargained like merchants instead of fighting like Sith. We survived, Mar corrected. The Empire endures. That's the only victory that matters. On the Republic flagship, the Jedi Council held a similar debate. Some viewed the treaty as shameful compromise. Others recognized it as pragmatic survival. But all agreed on one thing. They'd come within weeks of total extinction and somehow negotiated their way out. The Dalek withdrawal began immediately. Over the next month, 5,000 units departed through temporal rifts that subsequently collapsed behind them, sealed by the technology they'd provided. Occupied worlds were abandoned, their populations left to rebuild from ruins. The systematic extermination simply stopped. In exchange, 20 individuals, 10 Jedi, 10 Sith, departed with the final Dalek contingent. Volunteers, though volunteer, was relative when the alternative was galactic extinction. They carried data crystals containing carefully curated information about the Force, temporal theory, and organic combat psychology. None of them expected to ever return. This was exile disguised as advisory positions. But they went anyway because their sacrifice had purchased survival for trillions. Lord Scourge was among them. Before departing, he stood on Dromund Kaas one final time, looking up at the storm-racked sky. 300 years I've served the Empire, he murmured to Mar, who'd come to see him off. Fought Jedi, Sith, Republic soldiers, and in the end I'm sent to fight monsters in someone else's war. You're sent to ensure those monsters never return to ours, Mar corrected. That's the most important mission any Sith has ever undertaken. Scourge nodded slowly. Then he boarded the Dalek transport without looking back. The galaxy watched them go. 20 individuals, trading everything for the survival of their species. And as the last temporal rift closed above Korriban, sealing the Daleks away permanently, the combined fleets of Republic and Empire hung in space, former enemies, temporary allies, uncertain what came next. The war was over, but victory tasted like ash and compromise. 6 months after the Daleks withdrew, the galaxy was still processing what had occurred. Ziost remained a dead world, its sacred temples reduced to radioactive craters that would take centuries to decontaminate. 12 other planets bore similar scars, lifeless monuments to the war that had nearly exterminated all organic life. Memorial services were held across both Republic and Empire space, honoring the nearly 30 million who died in 5 months of mechanical horror. But the living had to continue, and that created unprecedented complications. The Republic-Sith alliance, forged in desperation, officially dissolved 3 days after the last Dalek departure. Ancient hatreds hadn't vanished, they'd merely been suppressed by existential threat. Now, with that threat gone, old grudges resurfaced, except something had changed. On the Senate floor of Coruscant, debate raged about the recent conflict. Traditionally, the Senate would have condemned the Sith Empire universally, called for military action, and reinforced the narrative of eternal enemies. But Senator Yadira of Alderaan stood and spoke words that would have been unthinkable a year ago. We fought beside them, bled beside them, watched Sith Lords sacrifice themselves to save Republic civilians. Can we truly return to calling them irredeemable monsters after witnessing their courage against the Daleks? The chamber erupted in argument. Half the Senate agreed. The other half accused her of Sith sympathy, of forgetting centuries of Imperial atrocities. I forget nothing, Yadira replied coldly. I remember every crime the Empire committed. But I also remember that when extinction came for us all, they stood with us. That deserves acknowledgement, if not forgiveness. The debate would continue for years, but the simple fact that it was happening at all marked a fundamental shift. In Sith space, similar conversations occurred in very different tones. The Dark Council met in their newly constructed chamber on Dromund Kaas, reviewing the war's aftermath. We allied with the Jedi, Darth Mortis stated, his voice dripping with distaste. Fought beside them, shared knowledge with them. The Republic now possesses data on Sith tactics, Force techniques, and strategic doctrine. And we possess the same about them, Darth Asina countered. More importantly, we survived. The Empire endures. Our power persists. Diminished power, Darth Ravage argued. 20 worlds lost, millions dead. And we negotiated with the enemy rather than defeating them. Where is the strength in that? Darth Maul, now the Council's de facto leader after the Emperor retreated into isolation following the treaty, stood. The strength is in survival. The Daleks forced us to evolve beyond simple conquest ideology. We learned that pure aggression has limits, that sometimes the dark side's path to power requires patience and strategy rather than immediate domination. You sound like a Jedi, Ravage sneered. I sound like a Sith who understands that extinct empires hold no power at all. Mar's masked face surveyed the Council. We will rebuild. We will grow strong again, and we will remember the lessons the Daleks taught us. That supremacy requires more than passion. It requires adaptability. The Council debated long into the night, but Mar's pragmatism won. The Empire would rebuild, would research the technologies salvaged from Dalek wrecks, would study the Republic Alliance model and potentially, impossibly, consider that eternal war might not be the only path to power. It was heretical thinking. It was also necessary thinking. On the borders of former Dalek-occupied space, scavengers picked through the ruins. Dalekanium armor fragments sold for fortunes. The material was nearly indestructible and resisted both energy weapons and force attacks. Salvaged temporal technology, barely understood, became the basis for new research initiatives in both Republic and Empire laboratories. Some scavengers reported strange phenomena near the sealed temporal rift sites, flickering realities, echoes of extermination rays that no longer had sources, mechanical screams in uninhabited ruins. The rifts were sealed, the Daleks gone, but their presence had left scars on the galaxy that transcended merely physical damage. They had proven that the Force, for all its power, was not the supreme force in the universe. That reality contained threats beyond Jedi and Sith comprehension. That the galaxy's conflicts, Republic versus Empire, light versus dark, were provincial concerns in a cosmos that cared nothing for their philosophical debates. Satele Shane stood in the Jedi Temple's highest meditation chamber, contemplating these truths. Master Kavar joined her, his presence a steady calm in the Force. The Order is struggling to process what happened, he said quietly. Half our knights question whether the code is sufficient after facing enemies the Force couldn't predict or control. The code isn't meant to answer every question, Satele replied. It's meant to guide us toward wisdom. And sometimes wisdom means acknowledging our limitations. The Sith learned the same lesson. Does that trouble you? That our ancient enemies and we reached similar conclusions? Satele considered this. No, it gives me hope. If the Daleks taught both Jedi and Sith that survival requires more than dogma, perhaps there's possibility for change. Not alliance, we're not ready for that. But perhaps coexistence. The Senate will never accept it. The Senate didn't face extermination, Satele said. We did, and that makes all the difference. In the unknown regions beyond Republic and Empire space, other forces watched and calculated. The Chiss Ascendancy had observed the Dalek War with clinical interest. The Grisk had retreated further into darkness, recognizing they were fortunate the mechanical invaders hadn't discovered them. Ancient Sith cults, hidden for millennia, emerged from their tombs and wondered if the galaxy had finally learned humility. And in the dark temple on Dromund Kaas, the Emperor sat alone in his throne room, contemplating futures both terrible and necessary. He had bargained away 20 of his servants, including Scourge, his wrath, to secure the Empire's survival. It was the first time in his immortal existence he'd compromised rather than dominated. The question that haunted him, had he grown weak or wise? He did not yet have an answer. Months became a year, then 2. The galaxy slowly healed its wounds, though the scars remained. Republic and Empire maintained their borders, their militaries eyeing each other with familiar suspicion. But trade agreements appeared that would have been impossible before. Diplomatic channels opened cautiously at first, then more regularly. Neither side trusted the other, but both remembered what true existential threat looked like. The Daleks had come, had nearly exterminated all organic life, had been negotiated with, not defeated, but convinced to leave, and in their wake they'd left a galaxy fundamentally changed. The Republic and Empire would fight again. Old hatreds ran too deep for permanent peace, but never again with the certainty that their conflict was the only one that mattered. Never again with the arrogance that the Force made them invulnerable. They had learned humility at the point of extermination, and that lesson, purchased with millions of lives and 20 exiled defenders, would reshape galactic politics for centuries to come. On Korriban, now abandoned except for scavengers and archaeologists, the sealed rift site stood silent. No more Daleks would emerge. The temporal technology the Empire had received ensured the seals would hold for millennia, perhaps forever. But sometimes, in the deep desert nights, those who camped near the site reported hearing echoes, mechanical voices chanting that single terrible word, exterminate. They were just echoes, remnants of trauma imprinted on reality itself. The Daleks were gone, fighting their time war in another universe entirely. The galaxy was safe, mostly, because 20 individuals, 10 Jedi, 10 Sith, remained in that other universe, fighting alongside mechanical monsters against enemies even more terrible. Their sacrifice had purchased survival, but their fate remained unknown. Whether they lived, whether they would ever return, whether they'd been corrupted or exterminated by the forces they now served, the galaxy would never know. They were ghosts, legends, the 20 who walked between universes. And in cantinas and academy halls, their story was told and retold, a reminder that survival sometimes required impossible choices, that victory could taste like defeat, that the dark and light could stand together when faced with something truly monstrous. The Daleks were gone, but they'd left their mark on the galaxy, in ruined worlds, in technological salvage, in philosophical evolution, and in the memory of 5 months when extinction came calling and organic life, against all odds, found a way to survive. The Force flowed on, light and dark in eternal balance, but now it flowed around scars that would never fully heal, permanent reminders that the galaxy was neither as safe nor as central as its inhabitants had believed. New threats would come. They always did. But those who remembered the Daleks would face them differently, with less arrogance, more caution, and the hard-won knowledge that supremacy was an illusion and survival was the only victory that truly mattered. The extinction countdown had stopped, but its echo would reverberate through galactic history forever. The war against the Daleks ended not with triumph, but with transaction, a negotiated exodus purchased through knowledge and exile. It was an ending that satisfied no one and saved everyone. In the years that followed, historians from both Republic and Empire struggled to classify what had occurred. It wasn't victory. The Daleks had withdrawn by choice, not defeat. It wasn't surrender. The galaxy maintained its sovereignty and independence. It was something unprecedented. A war that ended because both sides calculated that continued conflict cost more than it was worth. The treaty became legendary. The Treaty of Mechanical Cessation, some called it. The Compromise of Extinction, others named it. But most simply knew it as the Dalek Agreement, the document that proved even the galaxy's proudest powers could swallow their principles when faced with absolute annihilation. The physical scars healed slowly. Ziost remained dead, a radioactive tomb that would take millennia to recover. The 12 other exterminated worlds were quarantined, their ruins preserved as memorials. 73,000 Dalek casings were salvaged, their Dalekanium armor forming the basis for a new generation of defensive technology that both Republic and Empire researched in secret. But the deeper changes were philosophical. The Jedi Order, having witnessed Force powers prove insufficient against an enemy that existed outside their understanding, began questioning the absolutism of their doctrine. The Sith Empire, having survived through negotiation rather than domination, started exploring what power truly meant in a universe far larger than they'd imagined. Neither side forgot their ancient enmity. Republic and Empire would clash again. Some conflicts ran too deep for even shared extinction to permanently resolve. But when they met across battlefields in the decades that followed, both sides did so with the memory of standing together against something far worse. That memory didn't create peace, but it created possibility. The 20 who walked between universes became myth. Songs were written about their sacrifice. Force visions occasionally showed glimpses of distant battles in alien time streams, figures in Jedi robes and Sith armor fighting alongside bronze machines against enemies that bent reality itself. Whether these visions were truth or simply the Force processing trauma, no one could say. Lord Scourge never returned. None of the 20 did. They had purchased the galaxy's survival with permanent exile, and the galaxy honored that sacrifice even while moving forward without them. The Dalek technology, what little could be understood, revolutionized temporal science. The rift-sealing protocols provided insight into dimensional mechanics that had eluded Republic scientists for centuries. Some whispered that the true Dalek legacy wasn't the destruction they'd wrought, but the knowledge they'd inadvertently gifted through their withdrawal terms. On Korriban, the sealed rift site became a pilgrimage destination. Sith acolytes meditated there, confronting the uncomfortable truth that passion and power had limits. Jedi came as well, seeking understanding of threats beyond the Force's reach. Sometimes members of both orders arrived simultaneously, and in those moments, ancient enemies would stand side by side in respectful silence, the ultimate legacy of the Dalek War. The galaxy had learned that supremacy was illusion, that power without wisdom led only to extinction, that survival sometimes required compromise, alliance, and the willingness to acknowledge that the universe contained forces beyond any single philosophy's ability to defeat. The Daleks came, exterminated millions, and left behind a galaxy forever changed, not through conquest, but through the simple act of proving that even the mightiest powers could face absolute extinction if they refused to adapt. And in the end, that lesson, purchased in blood, negotiated in desperation, sealed in exile, might have been the most valuable thing the Daleks left behind. The extinction countdown had stopped. The galaxy endured. And those who survived would never forget the 5 months when mechanical hatred nearly deleted all organic life from existence. May the Force be with them. And may the Daleks never return. May the Force be with you. More stories await.